Welcome back to another pull request video. This is going to be following up from my previous PR review video where I actually went through some of the code and put some comments, and I'm going to go through some of the changes I included in this next push to hopefully resolve my comments, and also I included some additional code as well that you can actually see in my last video that should be up, basically demonstrating the entire prototype of the system so far. So the first comment I put on here is to add basically a check to see if the table exists before I try to go and delete it in my migration script or method. So I put that for two spots. So basically for both migration files that I have in there, and you can see it's marked as outdated. So if we go to the current if we go to the last spot we have here, you can see that, right, those are the comments. But if we go to, let me go back and actually look at what the latest changes are, you can see that those are going to be addressed. So I put this change here. So I added this if exists call. Basically that is built into Fluent Migrator, and it checks if it exists before it executes. So that should work for our needs, and I added it to both files. Again, we're going to have to test it by actually calling our migrations manually, but I think for now, for this pull request, it should be good to go. A couple other things I added was I added this new data controller. So basically, this is an API controller that's basically going to handle some of the routing that I need from my front end down to my down to whatever backend microservices. So this I needed to add to test my prototype of routing to my API gateway, and then have my API gateway route me downstream to my engine's API microservice. So basically what I added here is some just code to hard code me to allow it to do that, right? So what you're going to see is stuff that I'm not going to actually include in like any production stuff, but for right now, for my functional prototype, which is where I'm at in the project, I need this code to be in there so I can be able to test things like I need to. So for the purposes of this pull request, have the context be this is a prototype application. I need the connection from this front end to explicitly to be to the API gateway for right now. But I'm going to go through this like I would if I was looking at this as if it were going into production, so I'm going to put comments accordingly. However, I'm not going to address those comments for the sake of this prototype build, so hopefully that makes sense. So I added this data controller. It's an API controller. I added this endpoint for post engine data, and obviously post engine data, it's a GET request, I know, but I just need to, I'm not actually sending data yet. I just need to get my basically my endpoint to be able to call to the system, but I'm not actually in a spot where I'm going to be posting data. So immediately if I was going to see this, if I was looking at this in a production setting, I would probably flag this as change name of endpoint to be change name of endpoint, because this makes it seem like it is a post method or a post. That'd probably be fine. Can I not do a review and just add a single comment? I think I just want to add a comment. There we go. So I add a comment, change the name of endpoint. This makes it seem like it is a post. So you can kind of get a feel for why I put that. Anyway, for the sake of the prototype, I'm just creating a new engine model using auto fixture, which is stubs out everything you need. And then I am making a manual client using REST Sharp, passing it in my explicit URL or URI to my API gateway, localhost, whatever gateway post data, and then that'll route me to my engine's API microservice that's running in the background. And then I have it set to add my also. It's just because it's a little bigger, but if I scale the text down a bit, you can see that it formats, but I'm going to keep it larger for readability. I'm just adding a JSON body of the serialized engine model, and then I'm going to go ahead and post that to my client. And if I was looking at this in a production setting, I would immediately flag this section here, because you never want to explicitly create a client like that every time on an endpoint. You should be injecting some kind of service or something that basically builds you that connection, so that way every time you call this endpoint, it's not building the connection every time. And you want to avoid hard coding paths like this, especially in a controller. It really has no business being in a controller. For something like this, you could probably get away registering a service potentially as a singleton, depending on how you have it set up, but some kind of provider to give you this connection to this client, and then we can inject the client to wherever we need it, rather than manually creating a new REST client every time we call this. So avoid creating new client. We should be injecting some form of service to provide us our client dependency. There's a couple immediate reasons. So avoid or use dependency injection, register as singleton, possibly, depending on how you have it set up, and also avoid hard coding paths in code like this, especially in the controller. And also should be using configuration to get routes to be able to handle different environments. I think that's should be it for now. So basically what I'm suggesting is that if I were to see this in a production setting, you should flag this and offer some feedback or some suggestions on how to do this a different way. Again, I'm going to come back and add code changes to address my comments on my own code, and then go from there. But basically, this will be something to look at if you're ever looking at code in a pull request. Obviously, every system environment, every system is different. Every coding standards are different everywhere. But typically, you don't want your controller having a dependency like this on new REST client. You don't want to be passing in explicit routes, because then you kind of have blocked yourself from being able to code to different environments. Like the development environment, your production environment. That can be handled using a configuration pattern where we get it from basically a JSON settings file that is environment specific. And then in our middleware, we can say, hey, if we're using depending on what environment we use, we can update that configuration and then pull from that where we build this. And I'm going to show you that code next time. And then as far as just controller patterns in general, controllers should only be responsible for basically passing a request to wherever it needs. It shouldn't have any logic, especially not any kind of business logic. And so particularly for this endpoint really should just be saying, it should just be getting our engine model and then passing it to the client and then returning the response. And that's it. It really shouldn't be doing anything. So if you're ever seeing a controller, if you're ever doing any kind of logic, like if engine is greater than, if engine temperature is greater than 350, post it this way. If our carburetor is doing this, post it that. If we're ever kind of getting into the weeds of that kind of logic, that's kind of a red flag where maybe you could consider offloading it to a service to then be injected in. So that's just some things that obviously immediately come to mind. And then obviously, whenever you see await, just make sure that your endpoint is set up to be asynchronous. So we should be returning a task of iAction result that looks good, and then we're just returning okay, and then whatever the response is. Now we don't know necessarily what the who's basically is going to be calling this endpoint, so we don't really know how they're interacting with response. But we just probably should double check that the response coming back from whatever this client is calling is acceptable to be returning back to the user. So that would just be one thing to keep in mind. So I mean that's generally the main thing I want to call out just for this pull request video, is just a couple things that you could look for. We've already gone through these migration files last time, and I don't think I moved anything from my home controller. I think I just commented out my where I'm posting to my message bus. So I think that's good for now. Yeah. So I'm going to go back and make some of those changes again, really for the sake of this pull request series, right? Just to kind of get us in the feel of looking at code and trying to develop standards and look for patterns and what to check and and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's it. I should have a video coming up of the actual demonstration of where the state of my prototype right now. So that should be up, I think, before this, and then this should be up, and then I have a couple other videos I think in the works. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I think that's it for this one. So all right, everyone, see you.